but these days, let me see if I can get this going the right way. All right, get a little fire for you guys. I'm still messing this up a little bit. Hold on one second, we're gonna do the flip. Whoa! Oh, nothing like the old visionary flip, if you know what I mean. All right. What's going on, visionaries? How are you? Oh wait, it was locked. What is this? It's locked to rotate? Melody, what's up? You're in the chat. Nice to see you. Hello, hello. Aruba Dive Gal from Florida. Hey, what's up? How are you? And Sylvia, hey. I can't wait to talk about your ancestor today. We have big news to talk about. I should really try to slide the fire like slightly over so you can see it. Hold on. You guys watch my back and I'm gonna try to do this. Safety first. All right. All right, there we go. Now we need a little enfuegador. Una. I don't know. Whoa, that fire's hot, let me tell you, boys. All right. Woo! I tell you, they're making that fire hotter and hotter every year. You know, it's like the convoy. It's hotter and hotter every year when we come back. That's right. 80 degrees, it has a fire going. Yeah. Do you see the snow? That's right. So welcome to Colorado, everybody. I have some beautiful artwork here that my nieces made for me. It's sort of the one in the middle sort of says Uncle John. We can talk about the other two are kind of modern impressionists from my nieces. They sent me this. So today's plan is to play guitar. All right, and we want to talk with Sylvia. What's up, Marianne? Hey. I want to talk with Sylvia because today's a very important day in American history. So, I got some information from you from a gentleman who teaches at the University of Vermont. His name is Dr. Mark Stoller, and he's on the Board of Advisors to the United States Military on History. Board of Advisors to the United States Military on history. So I'm gonna brief you on what he taught me about what led up to the American Revolution from like 1760s on. What led up to the American Revolution, what were the policy choices, and what was going on socially in the colonies, and why did it happen? And what happened in England right before all this with their own glorious revolution. So I want to talk about that. I want to draw some similarities to what some of you have said may be happening today. And of course, we want to look at anything like that as something we don't pursue aggressively, right? We want to use our words to assert that we demand our rights as Americans, right? And so many of our rights have been violated and eroded over time. And hey, Smitty, what's up? Welcome. Great to see you here. And I'm going to say hello to everybody. This is just a quick intro, you know, for the people who just like flip through the video and they're like, do I want to watch this idiot today? So hopefully I'm not an idiot for you. Hopefully I teach you something that Dr. Stoller taught me. And he's recognized as one of the nation's, if not the world's, leading experts in history. And he advises the United States military on history. And Dr. Stoller taught at University of Vermont. So I'm going to break down some really interesting concepts that Dr. Stoller broke down for me, and you can access this information too. I'll direct you to that later. Patty says, the guitar reminds me of when you were playing it on top of the fire truck. Do you remember that? Does anybody remember that day? There I was, all covered in cocoa butter, singing the national anthem, singing Amazing Grace on top of a fire truck when 50 police officers showed up and arrested someone for a traffic ticket that he had never been informed of historically. I do remember watching that happen, trying to chill people out. Yeah. Sylvia, how are you? I haven't talked to you for a long time. And guys, since the last time we went live, one of these Antifa fools actually went to Sylvia's hometown, and Sylvia and local law enforcement ran that fool out of her hometown. So I don't know if you've heard about that, You know, I don't know if you guys heard what happened to Sylvia, but Sylvia had to defend her own territory. Jackie, what's up? Really nice to see you. Our city councilwoman is in the house. Okay, real quick on the guitar, and then we're doing a little bit of history, and then I'm going to poll the audience, okay? And I want you guys to chat, and I want to say hello to you, right? I'm sorry that it's been a while since I've talked to you. I've made some very big moves in business. In the last couple of months, I've been able to secure some contracts, several contracts in business. So what I wasn't able to do last year because I was spending time with you, I've been able to make up for this year so far. So very positive business moves. I'll talk to you about that a little bit later. And I kind of have a duality going on in my consciousness about one of the clients, so I want to talk to you about that too. All right, that's a plan for today. If you want to watch, cool. If you want to, kick grass, that's cool too. But I love you guys. I'm glad that you're here. First, how do you feel? Right? Play a quick something on guitar for you. Now we can start, right? Cool. How are you? I hope everybody's doing really well. Can anybody catch me up before we start what led to the American Revolution and how we came to find ourselves in a war with England? It started today. Do you know that? Can anybody tell me what happened today in American history? And of course, thank you for the compliments. That's great for my ego. I haven't seen you guys for like a month, for a while. So that's good. Thank you. What's been going on? What happened today in American history? Can anybody tell me? It's very important. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Jackie. What happened in American history? This is why I'm live streaming today. It's so important that you guys know this, right? As patriots. As patriots. All right, I'm seeing the ride of Paul Revere. Is that what I'm looking for? A silversmith answer? Cool. Thank you, Spitty. That's very nice of you to say. Is Carol in the house? Okay, sorry. I know we're jumping all over the place, folks, but it's important that we check in with our community. That's a big part of why I did the live stream tonight, this afternoon, today, wherever you are in the world, is to bring our community together and make sure that we all stay tight. And we know that it's important and necessary and appropriate to stand up for freedom in a safe, peaceful, and nonviolent way, right? We know that Sylvia has been working through some health issues, so prayers for Sylvia. It looks like, oh, Mary just said something. It's like by request, 14 YouTube vids have been, I don't know what that means, but I miss you too. It's nice to see you again. I know Sylvia knows because, Sylvia, I don't know if I can say, are we going to say your name and like your ancestor's name and what happened today in American history with the whole like going to war with England thing? Are we going to talk about that? All right, and then separately, Linda, hello. Ed's Truth, it's very nice to see you again. I hope you're doing well, my friend. Sylvia has worked through some health challenges and issues since we've come together last. So we definitely want to come together and please send down prayers as a community for Sylvia. She's in the chat as Silly for Him. And we're going to talk about her family, one of her family members today, and his impact on the start of the American Revolution. So Sylvia is an incredible patriot. As you know, she's been a moderator on the channel, and she's also showed up in person to help me lead convoys. So Sylvia led the convoy of honor with me when we were in Branson, Missouri, which was a lot of fun. Branson, Missouri. So a lot of respect for Sylvia, a lot of love for Sylvia. If you could find time in your prayers, if you say your prayers, I don't want to push it on you, but I got one right here. And anything that'll get me in trouble? Nope. I have the ESV over there with like 125 rounds of 5.56. The Lord works in mysterious ways. But the ESV is great because it has English Standard Version. It has all the Dead Sea Scrolls information. So if you're into history or if you're a Christian, that's a great book. And then this is the Duck Commander Bible that you guys got me. Actually, Sylvia Sylvia got this for me. And let me show you guys this just before we continue. And you know what? I'm sorry to shove my faith down your throats, but it's real. Check that out. This is from you guys. Can you see it? So this was from you guys. Sylvia was the one who gave this to me on behalf of the Visionaries, and it was to commemorate my experience at David's Tent in Washington, D.C., right before we had the pleasure of working through a false arrest that we have a civil lawsuit addressing now. We've been fortunate enough to beat all of the legal complications with just a pretrial motion, and one is pending now for a little violation, but we talked to the assistant U.S. attorney today via email, and we're going to see if that case gets dismissed as well, like everything else has. So it was a ticket, $130 for making a false report when the woman came over with the bullhorn and the stick and said, F your God, and master love. I don't want to say that. I don't want to use the language. She said a lot of bad language. If you want to know what she said, you can go back to July 7th, 2022 and look at the Standing Up for Freedom video. That's what this case is about. And the police officers tried to, say it was assault when I knocked that bullhorn out of the way after the lady hit me with the bullhorn. And they threw it out, and it didn't even go to 1 day of court, right? The first arraignment, they said, no, there's nothing against you. But they also submitted a $130 ticket that said making a false report. So I just took the video and I recorded everything that happened, and I took everything that I said and I put it in a nice letter and I put timestamps and I sent that to the U.S. attorney. So we'll see what they say. So we're dealing with that separately from that, and that's all gone very well. And I've never been convicted of a crime, and this is a non-criminal $130 violation. But I would rather pay the more than $1,000 to fly to D.C. and fight this in person in a trial, which I've requested, which may happen in July. And if it does, it would be a really good convoy opportunity, convoy to court, to just show a video and then leave victorious. So hopefully it gets dismissed pre-trial, and if not, I'm happy to win, in court. What can you do, right? All right, so Revolutionary War. Thank you. Geneva Henderson comes in, bottom of the ninth, and hits the ball out of the park. You're exactly right. Revolutionary War, Lexington and Concord today. All right, so let me go to the book real quick, and we're going to work our way up to that. We're not just going to start with Lexington and Concord. We're going to start in like the 1760s. All right, and then we're going to talk about what Sylvia's ancestor did. Sylvia, you tell me, as soon as Sylvia's comfortable, and I'm kind of trying to, thanks, Jackie. For God's sake, you're an honorable Marine. Very nice of you to say, thank you. That's one of the things that's most important to me in my existence. When I pass away and I face my ancestors, one of whom was a very, very well-respected and decorated Marine. When I face that Marine, I want to be proud of what I did on Earth. When I face my guardian angels, I want to be proud of what I did on Earth. So it's okay to stand up for your freedom, and I'm going to tell you about that today because that's how we came to have a country. Now, this isn't a video about starting a revolution in America. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to do is to take education from the United States top history professor, Dr. Mark Stoller from University of Vermont, who's also on the Board of Advisors on history to the United States military, which is a big freaking deal. Just say that to yourself. He's on the Board of Advisors for history to the United States military. So the most powerful and deadly people in the world ask you about stuff that's happened in the past that could affect their decision-making now. Credible? I think so. And if you watch the gentleman lecture, he's very, very credible, very credible. So this information is coming from him. He says, it's a little bit of a misconception, the American Revolution, which started today in 1775. In fact, we're going to talk about a problem that Congress had. Continental Congress, right? When George Washington shows up, we're talking about the First and the Second Continental Congress. But I'm going to break down some history for you because it's so important to get access to education. There you go, on Eagle's Wings. Educate, activate, motivate, go Visionaries. I know I said go X-ray, but go Visionaries. And if you're at home and you're like, what in the heck is he looking at and talking to? Or if you're like, well, what in the wide world of sports is this gentleman looking at, right? If you live on the East Coast. It's a live chat, right? So live chat runs continuously. I'm sure if you're in the video now, you're probably in the live chat. But if you're watching this after the fact, You can do it. Just go navigate over and click live chat replay, and that won't be available for you guys. Tell me like the first half an hour, something like that. I don't know. You guys know better than I do, but here's the history, okay? The American Revolution, Dr. Stoller says, wasn't so American, and it wasn't so much of a revolution. It was a bunch of Englishmen saying, hey, you sort of need to give us our rights. And then there were several decisions made by the government of England, who was facing a lot of debt because they had just fought the 7 Years' War against the French and won. So for 7 years in the colonies, right? For 7 years in the colonies, the English are fighting the French, right? And when they win the French-Indian War, the 7 Years' War, the English take Quebec and they push Quebec all the way down into the Ohio River Valley, where some of my favorite patriots live, namely Dee, Bruce, and Candy, and Shelly and Mike, right? So big shout out to the Ohio Patriots. But they pushed Quebec, or Québec si vous pouvez parler en français avec moi la langue de la salle. I'm just kidding. They're not dirty. They're good people. They were our first ally, right? As colonists, and we're going to talk about that. So after the 7 Years' War, England is in massive debt. Massive debt. And when I say massive debt, I mean, I think I have a good note on it. I think it's like 143 million pounds, 146 million pounds. Their debt is 146 million pounds. To put that in perspective, their total budget's never been more than 8 million pounds. That's a lot, right? So you're used to doing like 8 million pounds per year. Now you have a debt of 146 million pounds, and the interest on that debt is 5 million pounds. So England is like, shit, we gotta make us some money. And that's how the British sound when they get frustrated. So they had to find a way to make some money. And one of the ways that they tried to make money was by taxing the colonists, creating new taxes that Englishmen weren't used to having. And these new taxes, which we're going to talk about, like the Stamp Act, which taxed all public documents. All public documents, boop, pay for it. You know what I mean? And then eventually we'll talk about the 1 penny tax on tea, and how that, even though that was a symbol, it was still enough to enrage the colonists. And then what they did in a peaceful and nonviolent, it was peaceful. It was, it was peaceful. There weren't like bodies. The tea was thrown overboard and not the sailors. So it was merchant ships anyway. All right, so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to jump into it right now. I'm in the 1700s, but we're always, during this conversation, and please remember this. This is one of the most important points. You paying attention? Sorry, I need your attention though. The American Revolution, the way that the Americans justified it, the way that Thomas Jefferson, right, when he was doing a lot of the writing, George Washington, the way they justified a lot of what we wrote, it was based on the Glorious Revolution in England in 1688. A lot of the same thinking and logic that led the English to kill their king, right, and to give power to Parliament, and to put a very, very, very young King George III, like 20-something, on the throne, right? Like, it was called the Glorious Revolution, and this came about after some people like John Locke wrote some books. A dude named John wrote a book, and stuff went down related to awareness. So, to the publishing company that I've been talking with and that I'm talking with today about the book Soft Erosion of Freedom, I respectfully encourage you, and I'm not saying I'm John Locke and I'm not saying I'm Thomas Paine, but if we can get a book out there that's somewhere between, come on, help me, Common Sense, I drew a blank, John Locke's Common Sense, or is it Thomas Paine's Common Sense? Look me up on this, you gotta look me up. Talking about the social contract theory, right? So John Locke and Thomas Paine are two people I'm gonna talk about. That's kind of what the American Revolution was based on. We took the English logic that made the English Revolution legal, and then we just sort of used that in our writings. And civilian writers, Thomas Paine, Common Sense. Thank you for checking me on that. And John Locke, was he the treatise on government? What did John Locke write? Was it the treatise on government? Check me on Locke. But when he was talking about how the governed only govern by the consent of those who are governed, right? One only rules over us, leads us with our consent. And when that social contract is broken and the consent no longer exists, John Locke talked about how it was fair and appropriate to overthrow those types of governments. And England did that in 1688 with the Glorious Revolution. So again, today, I'm not trying to whip you up into a second American Revolution. In fact, Dr. Stoller argues that the first American Revolution is still kind of ongoing. We're still kind of a revolutionary country. And we're still kind of figuring out what our policies are going to be. And of course, that changes drastically between administrations. All right, are you with me so far? All right, I hope that you guys are with me. You men and women, you fine patriots are with me. If you're going to be a patriot in America, you better be an educated patriot. Because if you're not an educated patriot, you're going to be assumed to be the mob, one of the masses. And aristocrats and those governing, so those ruling business and government, will never give in to mob rule, right? Mob rule will never happen. And that's why we're a constitutional republic. We elect the people who represent us, and they go and represent us in a civilized way. And now we'll talk about this a little bit more, but the Senate, which was concession to the aristocrats to keep the money happy, the old money happy, those are 6-year terms. Not a lot of turnover, not a lot of flux, lots of social power for a long time. Congress, the lower house, 2 years, you're changed. So there's constant flux. You're making the poor people, the non-aristocrats, fight each other all the time, every 2 years to try to get their spot, right? So that keeps the poor in flux. The poor compared to, right, our senator class can be different, right? This is how it was perceived when America was founded, right? We were colonies, that wealthy landowners, right? Trying to represent their interests, whatever those interests were. So, visionaries, like Jackie says, I hope this makes sense to you. This is what we're going to talk about today. So, the whole beef that led to the American Revolution is because England has 148 million pounds, 146 million pounds in debt. The interest on that is 5 million pounds. Their total budget's never been more than 8 million pounds. So they need a lot of money to repay their war debt. And so what they decided to do is pass taxes on the colonies. So one, they're going to enforce the Navigation Acts. And basically what that means is salutary neglect is no longer appropriate off the coast of the United States. That's kind of like a buzzword. If I had a whiteboard, I would write salutary, S-A-L-U-A-T-O-R-Y, neglect. Can anybody give me a definition of salutary neglect? Has anybody ever heard of that term before, specifically related to imports and exports, shipping? Salutary neglect. What is that? I know there's a delay too, and then I have to give you time to Google it, and we'll see who's the fastest. I'm waiting. Who will it be? All right, so salutary neglect. Okay, we're almost there. What's up, Tim? Nice to see you. Good, thank you for coming in, okay? Salutary neglect is when the government just kind of like looks the other way and lets something blatantly happen. An example today would be recreational cannabis and psilocybin sales in multiple states across the country, while the federal government just sort of lets it happen and takes the payroll tax from the companies, right? We don't have to go into that, okay? Pursue your own healthcare as necessary and legal and appropriate and right. Use your mind. Anyway, salutary neglect back in the 1760s was related to shipping and smuggling. If England didn't let the colonists smuggle, the colonies would never survive. You know, they didn't have enough goods that they thought that they needed at the time because they hadn't read the U.S. School of Survival field manual to understand how they could survive on their own. Hold on, I gotta tend this fire. Seriously though, if you want the book, it's on Amazon. If you want it cheaper, send me a message. If you don't have a lot of money and you can't afford the book, but you want a copy of the book, let me know, falling. And I'll try to work something out for you, okay? Now everybody quick, put it in the chat how I'm supposed to put this log and how I did it wrong. Since you guys can only see this part, I'm just trying to like put that in the image, you know? All right. Cool. Mary, if you want to copy the book, send me a message, okay? And let me know where I can send one to you, and I will, okay? And since we're in Colorado at altitude, we're going to hydrate. Ow! Okay, what have we learned so far? Battle of Lexington and Concord was today, right? But we're going to back up, and we're going to work our way all the way through. Mr. Trench is in the house. Mr. Trench is in the house, and he said I totally did it wrong, but... Results speak for themselves, amigo. I hope you're doing well, Trench. I hope you're staying safe on the road, buddy. And it's awesome to see you in here. Lots of love and respect for Matt, right? For Mr. Trench. Trucker. I have that Green Miles trucking shirt, and I do wear it. In fact, I have a Patriot shirt on. I do. I have a Patriot shirt on under here. A little bit more history, but whoever can call out, I'll tell you what, if you can guess which Patriot shirt that you've seen many times that I'm wearing under this shirt, first person to call it, I'll send you a book, okay? I'll send you a book for free. You just tell me where. All right, so back to the history. The issue is, okay, lots of tax debt. England has to pay off the tax debt. They decide they're going to tax the colonies to get that money to pay down the 146 million pounds of war debt from the 7 Years' War, aka the French-Indian War, when the French got beat and got sent back, right? And they're all pissed off because they got sent back in disgrace. Louisiana went to the Spanish, a weak Spain, Dr. Stoller says, and Quebec went to the British, who then drove Quebec and extended the province all the way down into the Ohio River Valley, where many of you live today and where I've met with many of you, in the last year. Annie, what's up? Great to see you. Thank you for being in here. I love seeing the American flags when you guys put that up. Melinda, what's up? Convoy of Honor was great. That was really fun. If you can't find the book, or you can't afford the book, just send me a message. All right? We'll try to work it out for you. I'll try to work something out. Some people have made donations, so we'll just put that towards some books, and we'll send them to people who want the education. All right, they have to pay down the war debt. Salutary neglect is when England decided, the British decided, hey, we're not going to let you smuggle all this stuff in all the time anymore. We're going to kind of shake you down so we can get paid the duties and the import taxes on all this stuff. And not only are we going to do that now out of nowhere when we didn't do it before because it was part of the deal, unspoken deal, we're also going to search any vehicle we want, any boat, any ship or boat we want, anytime we want without a warrant. What does that remind you of? Can anyone tell me the amendment to the United States Constitution which protects us against that? What Britain was doing to American colonists by searching their ships to look for, contraband without a warrant? Which amendment protects Americans against that type of behavior? I know that, yeah, it's right, it's true. Good man. The Fourth Amendment protects against soot. Illegal search and seizure. Mary, good job. I see that you got it too. All right, a little mountain man spit can take anything off. All right. Good. Annie got it too. Ryan got it too. Silly got it too. Fourth Amendment, illegal search and seizure. That's the amendment that the DC Metropolitan Police violated when they towed my truck off the street without due process, right? And then stole items from it and damaged it irreparably. But we're dealing with that separately too, and I'm just gonna keep it tight until we're done. And then we'll go pay cash for a truck together. It's gonna be fun. All right, anyway, they have to pay off this debt. So they also passed the Stamp Act. In addition to enforcing the Navigation Acts, Britain decides that they're gonna pass the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act taxes every single published document. You want a book, tax, right? Newspaper, tax, right? A bill, whatever, tax, everything. Yeah, so the colonies couldn't survive, they thought. And it wasn't necessarily, at this time, the colonists against the king. Because it was a weak 20-year-old something, King George III, right, a young guy. It was Parliament that had just taken power, in the last 100 years with a tremendously powerful revolution. That was retaining a lot of this power and passing these acts. So the colonists and English Parliament were really going back and forth in a pretty aggressive way, and we're watching policy alternatives being presented and selected, and then we're watching the implications of those policy alternatives. And I think it's freaking fascinating. I think it's fascinating. And if you don't like that, well, that's fine. You're free not to like that. Scott Fire Weston would be proud of my fire. It's a good fire, right? 1. 2, congratulations to our friend Scott. His daughter was recently married. So congratulations to Scott and his whole family, our good friend Fire. Great job, buddy. Okay. The fire of freedom burns hot inside me, just radiates out. It's fires of freedom. All right, back to history class. England's got a huge debt. England says, I'm going to squeeze the colonies to get the money to pay off the debt from beating France. You know, and England owned like huge swaths of what is now France, right? It's not just Brittany. It's like huge swaths of France. And England and France fought forever. And leading up to this, I mean, depends on how far back you want to go. If anybody here is from Europe and like you have Celtic ancestry, you've been taught to think that Celtics were barbarians, right? Paint themselves blue, maybe like the Picts or, you know, big horns on the helmets. Many of those things could have been true. But the Celts conquered Rome. The Celts sacked Rome, conquered all of Rome. And there was the Celts or the Gauls, whichever one you want to call them. I've read Julius Caesar's commentaries on the Gallic War in Latin. That's how I learned Latin. So I read what he said about my, you know, ancestors in England, right? In that area in Wales. Wales means English speakers, right? Anyway, the Celts sacked Rome. They were incredibly powerful. Celts, Germanics, Rome, you had Transalpine Gaul and Cisalpine Gaul for the two different groups of Celts. And I don't know if you read your Bible, but there's a book called the Galatians. The Gaul Celts, the Gaul, France, Europe, people who look like me, your ancestry, mostly, right? The Galatians, Paul wrote them a letter in the Bible. It's in the New Testament. It's Paul's letter to the Galatians. The Galatians were a group of Celtic mercenaries who had attacked deep inside Turkey and then just set up a kingdom. And the Romans would frequently hire these European Celtic mercenaries to fight for them, and other tribes would hire them to fight against the Romans. And the Galatians in the Bible are white dudes from Europe who were mercenaries killing everybody in the time of Jesus, in what's now Turkey, which I think is fascinating. So if you go back and you read St. Paul's letter to the Galatians, liberty is mentioned 5 times. Check me out, it might be 6. It's one for every chapter. I think there are only like 6 chapters. So maybe 6 times it's mentioned, which I think is pretty badass, right? Thank you, Trench. So I don't know if you're if you're into that or whatever, you're into history, but Celtic history is fascinating. There's a woman from Catholic University of America who's a tremendous lecturer on Celtic history. And that's where a lot of us trace our roots to. If you're like Scottish, if you say you're Scottish, you're not Scottish, you're Celt. And you came from Ireland. And before you were in Scotland, you were in Ireland. And before you were in Ireland, you were in Spain, according to the Irish Book of Invasions, which talks about where they all came from. All right, and they say that people left Ireland to go to Greece, and that's what started Greece. If you read the Irish Book of Invasions, which is the oldest ancient history of Ireland, and they say they were founded by 8th generation Japhethites, Japheth, the white coastal living son or descendant of Noah, right? But anyway, I digress. Anyway, the Celts were amazing. Celts are also known as the Gauls. They sacked Rome, and that's why Rome sent Caesar up there to conquer all of Europe, because these people were coming down and just like destroying them in the beginning of Rome. So that's why like the Gauls and the Celts are seen as bad now. And if you're like Scottish or Irish or French or German, maybe Germanic, right? You can make the argument. Yes, there was a Norse influence like many hundreds of years later, right? Anyway, we don't have to go into the whole thing. But now you know. And knowing is half the battle. So what the colonists said, all right, so England has a lot of tax debt. They just won the 7 Years' War. They're taxing the colonists with the Navigation Act, the Stamp Act, okay? And so what the colonists do is they say, what the heck, my good men and women, what the heck? Are we not Englishmen? Do we not have rights? I don't know if they made the argument in that voice, but that's a good argument to make a voice in, or a good voice to make an argument in. All right. They said, hey, this is a problem. You're violating our rights as Englishmen. The colonists said this. They said, you're searching without warrants. The Navigation Act. They said, trials without jury, because they sent admiralty courts in. So these Englishmen who are used to a trial by jury as the law are now being judged in a military tribunal without access to the legal system. Does that remind you of anything today? Yeah. Anyway, trial without jury, admiralty courts, and they said this is violation of British law, but not only British law, but also British custom. So the colonists become very frustrated, okay? The colonists were specifically frustrated because they thought that this revoked their own ability to levy taxes on their own colonies. Right? On their own colonies. They say England is taxing us. They're all the way over there in England. We're all the way over here in what's to become America. They're taxing us without representing us because we don't have access to our rights. We don't have access to a trial by jury, and illegal search and seizure is rampantly occurring. Are you with me? You see what's happening? So what Professor Stoller says, what Dr. Stoller says is, it's really not that revolutionary. These guys just keep getting screwed over by these random and new laws that really disadvantage them, and they try to say something about it, and it sure doesn't go well for them. Roy, what's up? It's great to see you. I'm glad that you're in the chat. Mountain Granny, I'm really glad that you're in the chat. Awesome to see you too. So I just came up for air for a second, right? So, taxation without representation is the problem. Can anyone tell me which license plate in the United States of America that is written on? Every license plate says taxation without representation. Who can tell me? DC, that's right, Annie. Good job, you were first. And Raymond says no representation. The Bill of Rights, right? Bill of Rights are the first what? First 10 amendments to the Constitution. Okay, good to go. It's important to know these things about America and American history. Double check me on that, but I think it's just the first 10 are the Bill of Rights, okay? So here's what happens. The colonies say we have certain liberties that are guaranteed by the Glorious Revolution in England in 1688. So you can't tell us we just fought this revolution over there in England. We got all these rights. We killed the king, right? The parliament's doing a good job. You can't now tell us, kick grass, you can't have your rights anymore. We made a deal with you. We came all the way across the world to a new world, and we busted our butts in Virginia first at Jamestown. All you Plymouth Rock, freaking Massachusetts late to the game, freaking Sally come latelys. You know what I mean? Rah. All right. Anyway, my family are Jamestown people. That's part of why I care about freedom so much. Son of the American Revolution. That's why I care about freedom so much, right? Anyway, it's part of it. We've been serving ever since then too, as you know, right? Anyway, England's problems, Professor Stoller says, come from England's own military success. So they've won this war, they have this huge debt, they have to pay off the debt, so they screw over their own people. And when they screw over their own people, the colonists say, I tell you what, F you. No way, kick grass. We're not playing that game. We have rights as men, as Englishmen specifically, and women, okay? So in 1761 to 1765, what we're seeing is the Stamp Act. That led to the Stamp Act Congress. A bunch of colonists got together and said, we got to do something about this. It's a freaking problem. Plumber B, good to see you. And Liana says hello. So I just want to say hello, blessings. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much to everybody who's come into the chat. It's great to bring the community back. Today's history lesson is brought to you by TQ Trucking, who I really love. You know, I miss you guys over at TQ. So I look forward to seeing you guys soon. I have some surprises for you that I'm going to bring out to you. And I look forward to seeing everybody out east. Oh, cool, Jared. Jared and your daughter. Hello to both of you. So great job, young lady, trying to get some history. I'll make sure I keep my language as clean as I can now. And it means the shirt's staying on, guys. Sorry. All right, ladies, whoever. All right, here we go. 1761 to 1765 is what we've been talking about, right? Boom, then the Stamp Act hits in 65. Then the Stamp Act Congress, which is the first example of the colonies cooperating. The Stamp Act Congress, the first time that the colonists came together to create what will later become like a war with an army and a government and now America. The first time the colonists came together. Before it was like Virginia doing their thing, Massachusetts doing their thing. And you ask Hawthorne how he feels about the colony of Massachusetts, right? Nathaniel Hawthorne, isn't he the guy they threw out of there because he had like slightly differing Puritan versus Quaker versus Shaker versus, you know, Trembler? I'm not trying to make light of religion. What I'm saying is each colony had specific practices related to religion, and they would banish individuals. And in fact, that's how Rhode Island came to be founded. Individuals would be banished for not adhering to the religious norms and customs. Furthermore, there were places in the United States where you could be banished, jailed, killed for not believing in Jesus Christ, which is really a scar on religion, right? Things like that really sort of drive people away from religion. If you just jump in the book and you read it with a fresh mind and kind of put the pieces of history together, put it on timelines, it's fascinating and inspiring, and it'll change your life and it'll save your life, I think. But again, I don't want to shove all this down your throat too much, but it's a heck of a book, you know. It's a really good book. Anyway, Stamp Act Congress. First example of the colonists coming together and working as a team. I thought we were taking fire. It's okay, we do have several weapons around. We don't want to use the guitar as a weapon, but if we have to, you know, I guess we could, you know, go full Axl on it. Anyway, the first example of the colonies cooperating to repeal or boycott, right, is what they're saying. They're saying repeal it or boycott it. What are we going to do? How are we going to play the British, right? And they come up with a plan. The British Parliament decides to repeal it. But in 1767, they passed the Townshend Act, which taxes all goods from England. So Navigation Act, Stamp Act, okay? Townshend Act. Very important that we know these three. The Townshend, think of it like this. They sent the stuff from the towns in England, and so they taxed it. Townshend, okay? The Townshend Act taxed all British goods coming into the colonies. So there's already Navigation Act taxes. They're already shaking down every ship, right? And probably trying to get bribes or to levy taxes and fees. They have admiralty courts that can try you without due process. Imagine how pissed off you would be if this stuff was happening today. And I'm not saying that it isn't. All right. Anyway, I'm not saying that a lot of this stuff isn't happening today. But anyway, okay, here we go. So, the Townshend Act is 1767, and that's going to tax all incoming British goods. You know what happened? I'll give you one guess. What happened? What do you think the colonists did after all this stuff has gone down, right? So the Navigation Acts, the trials without judges or juries, only an admiral, right? The admiralty courts, revoking the colonists' ability to tax themselves and raise money and decide how it's spent in their own colony. Read state. It's happening today, unfortunately. Annie says, you draw your own conclusions, my friends. I'm just going to put the information out there. So this isn't a book. This is just my notes that I took from this guy's lecture. I just heard a lecture, saw a lecture, was fascinated by this gentleman, Dr. Mark Stoller, S-T-O-L-E-R, from University of Vermont. And he's also he's on the board of advisors to the United States military on history, which is tremendous thing. Okay, so the Townshend Act. You know what the American colonists did? They started killing people. They just started killing people. They said, forget it. They said, forget about it. Mob violence, massive violence is what kicked off, okay? Massive mob violence. And so Britain says, well, shit, you know, we've got a problem here. We're going to have to address it. Pardon me. They said, merde, nous avons un petit problème avec les colonies. We have a little problem with the colonies, you know what I mean? We're almost at tea time. Exactly right, Matt. Good. We're almost there, Trench. So, let me just come down a little bit. There's massive violence. The colonists rebel, okay? And they kill people. And they say, you're not doing this to us. In fact, we're going to kill you because it's gone too far now. So they tried everything they thought they could, and some colonists responded violently, while many other colonists thought that this was crazy. The colonists are split up into 4 groups at this time. Let me see if I can remember them. If not, I'm going to have to dig in my notes. But loyalists to Great Britain who say, like, England is the best, and anybody who doesn't think what England thinks is an a-hole. Now, those are probably very wealthy people who are doing a lot of business with the United Kingdom, or they have very high political appointments with the United Kingdom, so they're trying to perpetuate their own comfort to the detriment of the rest of the colonists. Does that remind you of anything? I'm just saying. Anyway, loyalists to England, neutral parties who were like, oh my God, it's so much of a problem to even pick a side. and I'm a wet noodle, and I don't believe in anything, so don't get mad at me, and please like me and be my friend. Okay, those are neutrals. And that's how a lot of people are today. They know there's something going on, but they've got their head under the Tempur-Pedic, cover or the pillow, and they just don't want to know what's going on. Okay, so I'm just saying that those are what the neutrals are. They're like little wet, cool noodles that have no value. That's what rhinos are. That's what a lot of people who play the game are, right? If you're high up in business, or if you're high up in government, or if you're high up in an agency, if you're high up in the military, you can't say, hey, what you're doing, sir, is causing horrible, effects on millions of people, or you're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your security clearance. Then you lose your access. Then you lose your friends. Nobody wants that. So everybody just shuts up and plays the game, even if they're pissed off. And maybe they'll come home and they'll have a brandy and talk to their friend and say, there really is something going on here, But they won't do anything because it puts their people at risk, their family and their friends at risk, okay? Their inheritance at risk, all right? Their career potential at risk. And that's why they're cowards. And it's only because of those cowards that America's found itself in this position today. All right, when strong, powerful patriots on the inside just bend over and acquiesce to what is wrong, what is immoral and unjust to the citizen, it leads to a situation where we find ourselves today. That's my argument. And my book will argue that very strongly, okay? A couple of metrics we can look at if you don't believe me. If you're like, you're bashing the government. I love the government. I just want the government to do better. I want to help the government do better because I don't know if either they don't know what's better and how to do better, or they know and they're choosing not to. I don't know which one it is, so I'm just trying to just help how I can, okay? Loyalists, neutrals, then there are moderates who are like, yeah, this stuff's kind of messed up. I don't know if we need a war. Like, let's try to use policy. And those are like a lot of your elected officials from the landowning gentry, okay? Very high position, still willing to get in the game a little bit. And some of my own ancestors were in this position, right? So they go to represent their communities, all right, and their states, frankly. Moderates. Then you have radicals. And the radicals are the guys like Ethan Allen, who took Fort Ticonderoga. He just went and took it in the name of the Great Jehovah and the Continental Congress. And there's a historian's joke where they say, we know he definitely did not have permission from the second, the Continental Congress, but we'll never know if he had permission or not from the first. I would argue that he certainly did, since we won the war that he helped start. So Ethan Allen captures Fort Ticonderoga. And Sylvia has some really, really interesting information about Fort Ticonderoga when we get there. We're not quite there. But when we get there, you're going to hear some personal history, right, about how Sylvia is a daughter of the American Revolution, as I'm a son of the American Revolution, although through different ancestors. Okay, let me jump over. In 1770, I'm in 1770 now, Lord North from England kind of did the colonies a favor. And he was like, look, I'm in charge. I got this new administration. I'm Lord North. You know what I mean? Let me try to make it right. And so he met with people and he made the decision to revoke all of the taxes on the colonists, which is a pretty good decision if you're new in power. He revokes all of the taxes except for a 1 penny tax on tea. All right, Trench, here we go. For a 1 penny tax on tea, okay? Lord North gets rid of all the taxes in 1770, except for the 1 penny tax on tea, which comes in 1773 as the Tea Act, okay? So I've taken you from the Navigation Acts, through the Stamp Act, through the Townshend Act, and now into the Tea Act. So all these instances of taxing the colonists from the English Parliament to pay down the massive war debt that was incurred winning the 7 Years' War over the French, to take Quebec from the French, and then the Spanish got Louisiana. It was a very weak Spain, as you know. They didn't have that territory for long, okay? Who can tell me what happened when Lord North allowed the British East India Tea Company to sell without tax except for the 1 penny tax? That 1 penny tax, what did that make colonists do? Remember when the Townshend Acts were levied, people got killed. So England sent in a bunch of troops and said, we're going to lock this down. And they sent Lord North in. Lord North says, hey, all right, take it easy. We're going to do you a favor. You know what I mean? Because this is how British people speak, especially the Admiralty. Indeed, we shall revoke your taxes in exchange for 1 penny tax on tea and all your children's blood. Or whatever, right? Whatever the deal was. The Tea Act. This was the last straw for the colonists at this point, right? The colonists are furious. So they go into Boston Harbor. They take the tea. Boom! And the tea goes in the harbor. That's right. Good job. Tea goes in the harbor. This creates a huge problem. This is like their convoy. They do a massive convoy in, and they do a peaceful, non-violent thing. They throw all the tea in the water, and they say, there's your freaking tea, you know, with your stupid umbrella and your funny talking, sounding speech, or whatever, right? And we probably spoke just like they did at the time because we were all like from the same place at the same time. So we all probably sounded pretty similar. Anyway, just dogging the British. They're a great ally, right? A lot of respect to our British friends and allies who are on the channel. So all kidding aside, this is just like the greatest breakup of all history. And if you've ever read the Declaration of Independence, it is the greatest breakup letter I've ever read in my life. It's the best Dear John letter that a gent could ever get. And they just lay it out. They lay it out. Win one, people. All right. Anyway, natural rights. We make the same argument that freaking John Locke made. The same freaking arguments that John Locke made. And this doesn't mean peace. This means victory in America, by the way, just so you know. When you see soldiers or whatever doing this is victory. Okay? That's the joke. Yeah, peace. Peace once we kick your ass. Freaking victory, homie. All right, anyway. I've talked about loyals, neutrals, moderates, and radicals. I've talked all the way up through the Tea Act, okay? The colonists flip out. They throw the tea in the harbor. England loses their stuff. They get very frustrated, is what that means to the young 6-year-old who's watching this, okay? Oh, MGB in the house. Your uncle 7 times removed was appointed to the committee that elected the delegates to protest the Tea Act. Good. Yes, very good. Cool. Isn't it fun and interesting to see how our own relatives and ancestors might have been involved in creating our own reality now? Right? That's fascinating to me. History doesn't repeat itself, but a lot of the trends and decision making influences do, you know, sort of repeats itself. I can see the argument both ways, okay? Now England is pissed, right? Not only have you flipped out and killed a bunch of people when we taxed you on everything from England, but England then had to repeal all the taxes, except for this little 1 penny tea tax, which is really not much, right? But it's enough. It's enough for the colonists to say, F you, no more. That was it, all right? So we came from the Navigation Act to the Stamp Act to the Townshend Act to the Tea Act, and then the British Parliament loses their stuff and they pass a series of retaliatory acts. Tater in the house! I'd just like to say this is one of the finest patriots in the land. And Tater, I hope you and your family are doing well. Your wife cooks the finest venison steak I've ever had in my life, and my compliments to your whole family, especially your motivated young patriot son, who's probably like in college now or something. I don't know, he's a big kid. Anyway, lots of love, buddy. I hope you're doing well, and my best regards to your family. It was worth stopping the video for, guys, sorry. He's a hardworking type of gentleman, it's true. Okay, so check it out. I'm in 1773 right now. We've worked our way up through 1760s. 1773 is the Tea Act. All right, that's the 1 penny tax. Then we have the Boston Tea Party. England gets pissed. They pass the retaliatory acts, which are also known as the coercive acts. The coercive acts. They revoked Massachusetts' colonial charter. They said, you're not a charter. You're not a colony. Give it. And they took it. They said, Massachusetts, and this is where this is going down, in Boston, in Massachusetts. All right? It's going down in Massachusetts right now, where Sylvia's ancestors were. My ancestors were in Virginia. And as we'll talk about soon, the Virginians showed up at the Constitutional Congress behind George Washington in his Virginia militia uniform, where he was essentially saying, Virginia will stand and fight with Massachusetts. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. Again, this is coming from the brilliant lecture of Dr. Stoller from University of Vermont, and also on the Board of Advisors to the United States military on history. So lots of respect to Dr. Stoller. If anybody ever tells you about this, you're a good lecturer. You're a smart guy. Great job, sir. All right, so 1770, and if I mess up, you can hop on the comments, Doc, and just let us know. Dial me straight here for the visionaries. We want to know the truth, okay? And this comes from a skeptic's guide to history. That's how he presents the information. I'm going to tell you the down and dirty, he says. Coercive Acts of 1774, all right, after the Tea Act in 1773. And this is retaliation. British shuts down the port of Boston Harbor. They shut down the harbor where the Tea Party happened. And they said, we're not going to open this again until you pay us for all the tea that you put in the harbor. And people like Sylvia's ancestor were like, okay, we're going to kill you. But he played it real cool for a while. All right, so they all went to the bar. They met in the bar in the morning before all this happened. Anyway, the Coercive Acts, the Retaliatory Acts, they revoked the Massachusetts Charter. The king now appoints the Massachusetts Council. So the colonists who are on the council, who are running Massachusetts, the king in England is picking who it is. It's not very fair. It's not very good representation, if you ask me, okay? This is when Quebec was extended down into the Ohio River Valley in 1774, That's when that happened. It did happen right after. So, and then that's when the First Continental Congress happened. So after all this crap has gone down, the colonists are like, what are we going to do? Like, this is crazy. We've got to freaking do something. What's up, Bruce? Another fine patriot. We've got to freaking do something, they said. And so they got a Congress together. All right, so they all show up at Congress, okay? 1774, First Constitutional Congress. But that wasn't the first time that the colonists came together. Who can tell me from earlier in the lecture, in our little discussion, what happened? What was the first time? When was the first time that the colonists in America came together as a cohesive unit? Can anyone tell me what it was in response to or what it was called? And I'm looking right here. Can anybody remember back to that? It's kind of tough. When was the first time that the colonists came together and worked together as one cohesive unit instead of separate colonies? Which of the acts was it in response to? Was it in response to the Navigation Act, the Stamp Act, the Townshend Act, or the Tea Act? It's a hard question. I'll wait for you. Come on. I'm going to make sure I got the answer right, too. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, good, Mary. The Stamp Act. The Stamp Act. Good job. It was the Congress in response to the Stamp Act. Once every single document that was published was taxed, the colonists said, forget about it. We like to read. We're not paying taxes on this. Come together right now. So it was the Stamp Act, and Mary got it. Good job, Mary. Way to pay attention. My hat's off to you. All right, so we talked about the 1774 First Continental Congress, and the moderates are in control. I told you that there were loyalists to England. There were neutrals who had their head in the sand, which ostriches don't really do, but whatever. Go ahead and believe that if you want. It's a nice saying. There are moderates who were like, we got to do something, but it should be through the legal process. And then there were radicals who were like, everybody get in a convoy, we gone. Except they weren't just driving around and waving flags. They were capturing munitions depots. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute, okay? Sylvia, if you want to type like a short little thing and have it like in a Word document that says what your ancestor did, like what that impact was, and if you want to put it up, I can then like read it to everybody. I'll just give you a couple minutes heads up if you want to prep that. And then I'll say, hey, Sylvia, roll it. And then you can pop, throw it if you want. If you don't want to do that, if you're in the middle of conversations and swatting trolls, of course, that's fine. They're going to come out of their little creature shelters, wherever we go. So if that sounds good to you, Sylvia, you can use your exact words to say what you want to say. And then I can read those words. And then we can have a discussion as a group about that because we're almost there. All right, we're in 1774. All right, and that's what's going on. The rule, the consensus, similar, right? The consensus was at the 1774 First Constitutional Congress, we want our rights as Englishmen. Stop treating us this way. We're freaking Englishmen. We're out here creating colonies for you. Do what you told us you were going to do. All right? Do what you told us you were going to do. That's what they want to say. And the moderates are in control. This is very important. There wasn't a decision to go to war right now. The moderates are in control, okay? 1774. We can't go to war yet because there's no Marine Corps, but we'll talk about that in a minute. All right. London decides when we do this, And we have this Congress. And when we say to them, hey, we want our rights as Englishmen, we want to resolve this, London decides they want to fight. They want a showdown. And they're going to exert the dominance of their empire on their colonies, even more heavy-handedly, with even more of a heavy hand. So they send a guy named General Gage. General Gage is sent from England, and it's about to go down, okay? He seizes guns and ammo that were being stored at Concord, all right? Then the colonists seize Boston and Fort Ticonderoga with Ethan Allen, and then Bunker Hill happens, okay? So we're about to jump in to what happened right here, okay? And the colonists, I'm seeing something here. It says the ships the tea were on were American ships. It was discounted tea from China. We were also buying tea from the Dutch. And so the English were trying to like undercut the Dutch tea undercutting with only the penny tax. Very good comments right there. 5th generation Irish American. And the Irish are the oldest. Like they say that before the people came to Scotland, they came from Ireland. And in fact, Robert de Bruce uses that as an argument when he writes to various Scottish princes and kings trying to get them to help him with his wars, right? He says, we all come from Ireland together, and before that from Spain. So the Gauls, the Galatians, or the Celts, if anybody's done 23andMe, you might see blood from Spain, Portugal, France, England, Ireland, Scotland. You'd be like, oh, this is strange. Why? Because your freaking ancestors conquered all that and moved around it as humans moved throughout the earth, right, over an extended period of time. Anyway, back to the stuff. I'm educating you, all right? So that's when Lexington and Concord happens. General Gage comes in, and General Gage decides that he's going to arrest John Hancock and Sam Adams. So when General Gage says, we're just going to take their leaders, right? We saw it happen when we were in D.C., right? They decide they're going to take the leaders out. So General Gage goes out, and he has his men arrest Sam Adams and John Hancock. Then he seizes the guns and ammo at Concord, okay? Lexington and Concord. Shot heard around the world, started the American Revolution that led to our freedom now, which has been continuously eroded since that time. Except for like a nice gap. But we'll talk about that later. We're fighting during the gap. We're all fighting. So creating and protecting it. Fort Ticonderoga happens at the same time. Bunker Hill happens shortly thereafter. You all know that we stayed at Bunker Hill. So, Sylvia, you are up. And that looks like perfect timing because she just said, story of Captain John Parker. So, Parker, that's Sylvia, right? Captain John Parker and Parker's Revenge. You ought to read about Parker's Revenge. What did your ancestor do, Sylvia, to those mean old British? I can't wait for Sylvia to put it in here. You know, it's an incredible story, powerful story. The colonists said no more. And so continuously what you're seeing is the colonists taking action. So they seize control of Boston. The colonists seize control of Boston, driving the British out. The British go to New York, right? And the logic of the events, this is what Dr. Stoller says, the logic of the events drives the moderates towards the radicals' perspective. Why is this important? People who are on the fence and who are wishy-washy can now see that other brave patriots are standing up and taking action. And that leads them to be brave enough to stand up and take action themselves, which then leads others to stand up and take action for America and for the patriot cause. All we want is access to our rights as Americans, just as the colonists wanted access to their rights as Englishmen in the face of policies that have continuously eroded their freedoms, just as we have been subjected to policies that have continuously eroded our freedoms. So again, this isn't a call to arms or like a revolution. This is just an education and a comparison, right? An analysis. We're doing a little bit of conversation, lecture, analysis. We're collecting social data. First-person intelligence is being collected in real time. Primary source information right here about what Americans think, which is incredibly valuable. Okay. Anyway, General Gage arrests John Hancock and Sam Adams. Everybody goes nuts, and we start killing people, and we conquer forts and bases. We take some cannons, right, from Fort Ticonderoga, and they made it all the way down and ended up being quintessential in the victory of a battle later, which we can talk about. Washington did a lot of very good things as a general and president. He also made a lot of mistakes and was generally seen as like not a very good military commander at first because, you know, he lost several engagements before capturing a British army and then securing the help from the French in so doing. All right, but we'll talk about that in a minute. The logic of the events drives the moderates to the position of the radicals who want revolution. The moderates just like wanted their rights back, like we want. But these radicals, maybe we could look at the radicals as like the people who went to J6 and who stormed the Capitol on J6, many of whom are still in jail without trial now, right? I was not there. But that's kind of the radical position. The moderate position is kind of where we are, and I know that there are people on the chat who are across the whole spectrum. There are some people who are neutral, who don't want to watch this stuff and don't want to know what's going on and they want to get the nails done and whatever. Don't tell me about these problems. What will we have for dinner? Which couch cushion will we get? Right? Where will we go on vacation? What's soft and lovely and comfortable and distracting? Those are the neutrals, the little noodles. All right? And then you had the loyalists who were like, hey, I don't really want to fight. I'm making out pretty good with England here. You know what I mean? Either because I have a cushy government job or because I do a lot of sales to them, like feeding their army, etc. Okay, does that make sense to you, the four groups? Loyalists, neutrals, moderates, radicals. The important point that I'm making right now, the whole population is split into those four groups, okay? So just saying that the more action the radicals take, the more moderates are pushed towards the perspective of the radicals, right? You saw how many hundreds of people showed up for the convoy. They saw people standing up. They came out and showed up. Let that be a lesson to you, patriot community, okay? After this happened, England loses their stuff, and we decide that we're going to create a continental army under General George Washington. This happened at the Second Constitutional Congress. George Washington walks in wearing his Virginia militia uniform. I think he's a colonel at the time. Walks in his uniform. What he's saying is, I'm ready to fight, all right? I didn't wear my freaking fancy clothes, all right, with my high little socks. Okay, I wore my fighting clothes. So Virginia is ready to go get down with Massachusetts. And that's how it happened, all right? We started a continental army. The British used Hessian mercenaries to try to kill a bunch of us at the time. And at this time, this is when America broke away technically because the colonial assemblies in the colonies seized power from the royal governors, which created de facto revolutionary governments. So that's when America became a revolutionary state. After the Second Continental Congress, when we created the army, we were fighting the Hessian mercenaries, and then we decided that the colonial assemblies were going to go back and seize the power from the royal governors. That made our own de facto revolutionary governments as Americans. That's how that happened in the colonies. And that actually led to the first American Civil War. And I don't just mean like Englishmen against Englishmen in the American colonies. What I mean is the colonists within the colonies. I told you there were four groups of them. Loyalists to England, neutrals with their head in the sand, moderates who want policy change, and radicals who want to kill people to get the policy change. Okay? So as this is happening, the moderates are being pushed over to the radical side. The neutrals are being woken up and they're forced to take a side. The loyalists are getting attacked by these guys over here. Okay? That's how that's happening. And that continues to happen. That leads to war within the colonies. So some colonists, the loyalists, tell the radicals, hey, we're not going to war with England. The radicals say, we're freaking already at war with England, dog. And they say, no, we're not doing it. And they say, yes, we're doing it. And then they kill each other until they make the decision to go ahead and form the army. So there were civil wars in multiple colonies. Multiple people were killed. And that led to the colony by colony decision to create the constitutional army and then to engage in more of a it wasn't full war, but total war, but more of a full war towards total war. In 1776, all right, that's when Thomas Paine publishes Common Sense. He uses inflammatory rhetoric and fact to argue what John Locke argued before the English Glorious Revolution in 1688. So you see Thomas Paine building on what John Locke was talking about, where the governed only govern by consent of those whom they govern. And once that consent goes away, it's right and appropriate and just for the people to get rid of that government and put a more representative government in place. Again, I'm not calling any of you to revolution. This isn't about a revolution now. This is an educational conversation with you guys about what's happened historically, done by our ancestors to create this fine country, which needs our help. Okay. In 1776, the Continental Congress opens America's ports to the world. This is before the Declaration of Independence is published. This is in January of 1776. You want to talk about 17? And I guess what I didn't talk about, I'm sorry. I wish it's in the car. In 1775, we talked about this. The Continental Army is established under Washington. We decided that we have to fight the British. But Congress had a problem because Congress knew they were going to go to war, but they didn't have a Marine Corps. So on November 10th, 1775, Congress sends Captain Samuel Nichols and Captain Robert Mullen to a bar in Philly to drum up 2 battalions of Marines. Okay? November 10th, 1775, Captain Samuel Nichols, who's the 1st Marine Corps Commandant, and Captain Robert Mullen, who's the 1st Marine Corps recruiter, go into a bar in Philly called Tun Tavern. A ton was a small keg. Tun Tavern. And they recruit 2 battalions of drunk colonists to climb up in the rigging and shoot bad guys in ships and to do other work. So that's when the Marine Corps came about. Once the Marine Corps came to exist, Congress knew that they could go to war, and they had a good chance of winning. So that's why the Marine Corps was founded in November of 1775. And when we come all the way up here to January of 1776, November to December, December to January, we're talking 2 months after the Marine Corps is founded, Thomas Paine publishes Common Sense, and the Continental Congress decides to throw open the American ports to the world. So, 2 months before opening their ports to the world and saying, F you, Great Britain, you can't decide who we trade with, we'll trade with anybody. That's a real Declaration of Independence. Opening your ports to the world and saying, come on, goods and services, come on, we'll take it. Right? That's a Declaration of Independence. That happened in January. And that's why Congress needed Marines to secure all of the ports up at the rigging, right? Secure all these people from all over the world who are going to come into America for the first time. Somebody's got to keep that safe. Somebody has to deal with the British naval threat to protect our harbors and our assets, right? So that's what the Marine Corps came to exist for. Back in 1775, my Marine Corps came alive. And then Congress felt safe and warm and fuzzy, and they knew we could go to war against the British. All right. January 1776. Then the Declaration of Independence is written and comes out, right? Then in March of 1776, privateers are authorized to attack the British. Paid, authorized pirates, privateers from the colonies. Just kill them, get them, sink them, get their stuff, go. It's authorized. And then get this. For all of you secret squirrels out there and lovers of diplomacy, in April of 1776, a secret committee was established to try to get foreign aid and foreign investment and allies and military support. And we found that with France. But France was very slow to come and help America because they just fought a war against England and got their butts kicked. So they didn't want to fight a half-assed war against England, but they definitely wanted to fight England because they just lost the 7 Years' War, they lost Quebec, they lost Louisiana, and there have been a lot of blood and treasure spent on that by the French, so they're pissed, right? So the French say, look, if your goal is independence, full independence, we'll get you back, but you got to show us that you can do well. Washington lost several times, but then he captured an army. The French say they're going to help us, and they send Lafayette from France, Marquis de Lafayette. And one of my ancestors, I have the letters, they're in a university library on the East Coast, where one of my ancestors, who was the elected official from that town, rode out with the other town officials to meet Lafayette. And he said they had, a very good conversation and everyone was in good spirits and they talked about what was to come and how they could support each other. So I've read these actual letters, about watching this happen. And it's incredible to think that my own ancestor met with Marquis de Lafayette. Furthermore, Marquis de Lafayette came in at Valley Forge. All right, that's when the colonists learned how to fight. Lafayette came over from France, right? He was a combat engineer, like yours truly. In fact, the majority of the officers that Lafayette brought to Valley Forge to train the colonists were combat engineers. So Combat engineers were the ones that were brought to create the American Army, okay? And to help keep them safe and healthy and to teach them about sanitation and how to build. You can still go to Valley Forge today and you can go into the actual huts, that they built. The chinking is still there, the wood logs. You can see the fireplaces in there. You can see where the men slept in the bunk beds. Then you can also tour Washington's headquarters there, where he stayed and where his headquarters was at Valley Forge, which is tremendous. It's incredible to see. If you've never been to Valley Forge, you should absolutely go. And you can hike, you can ride your bike. It's an expansive park. They have a wonderful museum. It's very, very good park, okay, Valley Forge. But Marquis de Lafayette and his combat engineers are the ones who did the training to elevate the skills of the first Patriot movement. And certainly we still have combat engineers who are helping motivate and train the Patriots today. Okay, you can do it. Anyway, the secret committee that was formed in 1776 works to deal with France. France sends Lafayette, okay? In June and July, Congress decides on independence. That's it. We're going to go for it, okay? July 4th, 1776, that's when the Declaration of Independence was published. And that's why we celebrate that as Independence Day. But before that, remember that the ports to all of the colonies have been thrown open to the world. So that's Congress declaring independence in a way, And so then we see the formal declaration on July 4th. I think it may have been written on the 2nd and published on the 4th, but I don't have that in my notes, so don't quote me on it. All right, I'm almost done. Last page of notes, okay? The Declaration of Independence, and I've been hitting this theme the whole time, is based on John Locke's arguments. John Locke was the British civilian writer before the British Glorious Revolution in 1688, who said that men and women have rights to life, liberty, and property. Well, we just changed it a little bit to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and property. The whole Declaration of Independence, the breakup letter, is based on John Locke's argument of natural law, right? Rulers only rule with the consent of the governed. When the governed no longer consent to how they're being ruled, there are mechanisms in place which can sort of switch those folks over so fresher and more appropriate perspectives can come in. That's why it's so important that you guys vote, okay? It's really important that you vote regardless of what you think about the integrity of our election systems. And you can say whatever you want related to that. But Georgia and Colorado are going to be really big. Wisconsin are going to be tremendously important states coming up in the presidential election. So if you know anybody who lives in those states, really start talking to them now and don't hit them too heavy. It's like religion, and that's why I've tried to catch myself. If you lay that religion on somebody too hard, they're just going to block you off and they're going to go away. They're not going to listen to you. But, maybe if you drop a couple little patriot things to them from time to time, hey, did you see, this policy? What do you think about that? Hey, did you see this? What do you think about that? You can start to plant the little seeds. Seeds grow into trees. Trees of patriots, forests of patriots that drop patriot knowledge fruit that grows into new patriot trees. All right, I want patriot forests. All right, last thing. Our Declaration of Independence is based on the British Glorious Revolution's writings by John Locke, which say that the rulers only rule by the consent of the governed. And when the governed no longer consent to the way in which they're being ruled, like all those new taxes we talked about, Navigation Act, Stamp Act, Townshend Act, Tea Act, retaliatory acts, or coercive acts. Perhaps you remember what we've talked about. Right? When that happens, there's really no longer consent. And so when the colonists tried to speak and use words and have an exchange, a diplomatic exchange, the military got sent to them. And they got overpowered, right? Until they rose up and killed a bunch of people and took a bunch of really important land. Strategic position, whatever. While at the same time, working to build allies internationally with the secret committee. So you have the radicals who are taking direct action. You have the moderates who are taking political action. You have the neutrals who have their head in the sand, who are just crying. And then you have the loyalists who are feeding information to the British. And during this whole time, colonists are killing each other in the colonies who have differing views. For example, the loyalists versus the radicals. Right? There's certainly examples of that occurring. So I think it's very interesting, okay? Life, liberty, and happiness. Just powers come from the consent of the governed. And you must abolish any government that breaks the social contract. This is what John Locke said in his writings. And the British agreed, and they overthrew their king and they killed him. And then they put like a 20-year-old king in charge, King George, and that's who we're essentially, our colonists were fighting with, his parliament and him. The parliament were the one passing the laws. A lot of people thought there was a big conspiracy around King George. A lot of stuff was happening with the Catholic Church, like in Quebec, and some other things happened. So there's a huge conspiracy theory. Eventually it got to the point where they were like, George has got to go. And so they went after him as well. All right. That's it. The British theories were used. So what does that mean, right? You could draw another example to the Bible. Whenever Jesus was in a debate, an argument, a teaching opportunity, he often used scripture from the past that was recognized as the law, the Torah, the doctrine. So he would use the law in his quotes to be correct and right in the eyes of his contemporaries. Okay? Thomas Jefferson and the other colonists who wrote the Declaration of Independence used what Thomas Paine wrote about in Common Sense in 1776 and what John Locke wrote about in England many years before, prior to the 1688 Glorious Revolution. The same theories were used, and that's what made it legitimate and legal in the eyes of the world. Okay? So, my point is, when you're talking to people, quote these things. Talk about these real things that happen. Don't run it down their throat like I've kind of done to you guys. So I'm sorry, it's kind of been a longer lecture or class tonight and conversation, and we've been able to bond as a community again. But please know that the more we can use intelligent, proven, trusted, loved, beloved speech in our own discourse, the more accepted we will be. And also know and understand that any kind of mob rule or anything that appears to be mob rule will never ever be allowed to win or succeed in the eyes of the public. And furthermore, mob rule will never be projected publicly as what has come to be policy, except through like very sneaky and slow disclosure movie around the types of things. And what I mean by that is just be careful what you say, right? And what you do. Be deliberate with what you say and what you do. And if you speak from a position of authenticity and truth, like I always try to do with you, people will receive you better. And the better people come to receive Convoy Going Patriots, and it's almost convoy season, but Convoy Going Patriots, the better our whole patriot movement will be received. And furthermore, the more we can educate each other, the more powerful and capable we'll be as a patriot movement who are, just kind of saying we want our rights as Americans. Okay? We want our rights as Americans. And we'll do another video later about how I perceive our rights to have been softly and gently eroded over time so as not to startle us or to make us too aware of that power. All right, that was the history lesson. I hope that was helpful for you to recap that. A wise person once told me, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So to sum it up, England just won the 7 years French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War. They had a huge debt, 146 million pounds. The interest on it is 5 million pounds. Their biggest budget they've ever had is 8 million pounds. They decide that they're going to get that money back and pay down that war debt, which they used to beat France, their old enemy, right? Their arch enemy, to get France out, even though they're speaking French in the English court because c'est la langue, professionnelle, la langue de la nobilité, right? So they're speaking French in the court in England, but they're conquering them anyway. 7 Years' War, huge debt. They got to pay the debt down after beating France, and they decide they're going to tax the colonists. All right, and the taxes that we talked about were what? How did it start out? There was Stamp Act. There were Navigation Acts, Stamp Act. There was Tea Act. There was Townshend Act. Then there were the retaliatory or coercive acts. After all this happened, and the whole time, the colonists are asserting themselves as English citizens, asking for their rights as Englishmen. England was enforcing the law with a very heavy hand. They did away with trial by jury. They sent in admiralty courts. Furthermore, they did illegal search and seizures on boats and on properties to try to find items to tax, which we saw, right? We don't have to go into it, but we saw the stuff. We've seen the stuff around the country and around the world, right? Okay. So these taxes get so bad that the colonists stand up. There are 4 different groups of colonists: loyalists to the crown, neutrals with their head in the sand, moderates who want policy change, and radicals who want to fight. Okay? And eventually, everyone goes over to the side of the radicals, except for the loyalists, who engage in civil war in the colonies to try to change policy. Eventually, the colonists win because we decide to create the United States Marine Corps in 1775. And we could probably send the video there, but out of respect for the other services, we'll give them a little bit of a nod too. The Continental Army under George Washington went up to support Massachusetts. And it was the Virginians showing up at the Second Continental Congress behind George Washington in his Virginia militia colonel's uniform saying, "I'm ready to fight for you, Massachusetts, and Virginia has my back." That's how it happened. That's how we came to be a country. The rest is history. I talked to you about Valley Forge and how Marquis de Lafayette and the French were our first allies. The French were ready to get back at the British because they had just lost the 7 Years' War and all of their North American territory. So I think that this is pretty interesting. I hope that you enjoyed it. It's been wonderful to see your names and to see you guys in the chat and just to be reminded about what an incredible community that we have. Please click into Sylvia's story. It's right here. There's a link right here in the chat. So again, if you don't have the live chat, pull up the live chat, okay? And you can go right back down here and you can see it. Did the Air Force fight in the Revolutionary War? The Air Force was the Marine Corps at that time, and they were up in the rigging of the ships and the crow's nest shooting down. That's what we had for Air Force, I think. We might have balloons. I don't know. You know, Monitor and the Merrimack, the submarines, they came later, right? But I don't know about the Air Force. It's a funny joke yet, I know, but I'm into that stuff. All right, guys, we're going to have another episode soon. The fire's getting low, but it hasn't gone out yet. Okay, it's still burning over there. I'll go take care of that right now. I'll play you out on the guitar. Don't forget to check out the book. Thanks again to TQ Trucking, right? We're saying those are some of our favorite patriots in the country. All right, and we'll say goodbye with some Townes Van Zandt, right? All right, see if I can even pick one of these out for y'all. All right. Love you guys. Thanks for hanging out. Hope you enjoyed the history lesson. Stay motivated. And remember, share something with a patriot. Teach another patriot something about our history as Americans. It'll help influence our decision-making and our thinking now. And as always, thanks for being here. Really appreciate you guys. And I love you, and I'm out.